What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my transfer tips for Game Week 25. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's teams and give my opinion on whether they are good moves or not, plus some possible alternatives as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. So let's start with Alexander Isak. No forward has had more transfers out than him so far going into Game Week 25, which is quite interesting given how well he's done for most of this season. A big factor is the fixtures. So it's Man City away this week, Forest at home in 26, who have defended pretty well for most of the season so far. Liverpool away in 27 is tough. West Ham away in 28, not bad, but then it's a blank game week. So 3 of the next 4 are away, 2 are against City and Liverpool, and then in 29 you don't even have a fixture. My general view would be, if you're not sure about selling him, if you've got a lot of money wrapped up in him, and you're not sure what your chip strategy is yet, I would probably lean more towards keeping him. There's not a huge amount of standout forwards to bring in right now. Like Gakpo's good for Liverpool with the double, but most of you are probably already tripled up on the Liverpool players you're going to have for Game Week 25. I think Watkins could be good, but we don't even know if he's fit yet. And although Man City away is not a fixture I would go out of my way to target, it's not as bad as it once was, and the Newcastle attack will cause them problems. Forest at home in 26 is fine for someone like Isak, and then West Ham away in 28, you're not really worried. And by the time you get to that blank in 29, you can then decide to sell him if you need to, or you may end up free hitting in 29. For what it's worth, if you know you're going to free hit in 29, I would definitely keep Isak, because Newcastle and Palace will almost certainly double in 33. And after that blank in 29, you've got Brentford at home in 30, and then Leicester away, Man United at home, and then a probable double in 33. Like for those people that are free hitting in 29, he's definitely worth keeping. The only real people that should be considering getting rid of Isak is someone in my position, where I'm almost certainly not going to free hit in 29 because I've only got Isak, 1 Crystal Palace player and 2 Liverpool players, because my third Liverpool is Arne Slot, who's obviously going to go eventually. So the chances of me free hitting in 29 are slim, and I've got hardly any money wrapped up in Isak. I got on him late, so not only did I miss the points, I also missed the price rises. And I think I mentioned this in a video already this week. 9.1 million is what I bought him at. He's now at 9.5, so I can sell him for 9.3. I only lose 0.2 million. And I think with the fixtures and the amount of sales that he's getting, I'm hopeful his price won't go up over the next few weeks, and I can just buy him back on wildcard after Game Week 29 for not much more money than I sold him for. So in that scenario, you can maybe look at getting rid if someone like Ollie Watkins is fit. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to keep him because I think the next couple of fixtures aren't all that bad. So one forward that people are looking to bring in is Jean-Philippe Mateta. Only 7.3 million, nearly 100,000 transfers in so far this week. And the next 4 fixtures look decent. So you've got Everton at home in 25, followed by Fulham away, Villa at home and Ipswich at home. You could argue that Everton, Fulham, Villa are not easy fixtures, but as a combination, the next 4 look good. And with Villa in particular, Cons has just picked up an injury in the FA Cup. We don't yet know exactly how long he's going to be out for. But I think they've only got 1 fit centre-back right now, and that is Disasi on loan from Chelsea. So it's not looking ideal. Now, Palace, like Newcastle, do blank in 29, but if you're someone that's quite likely, or is definitely going to free hit in 29, bringing in Palace players looks good. 3 of the next 4 are at home. You can obviously take them out on your free hit in 29. Then you've got Southampton away in 30. The 2 fixtures after that are not amazing, Brighton at home and City away, but they're certainly not bad. And then you've got that probable double in 33. So on a free hit 29 strategy, Palace look good. Now, whether it's worth taking out Isak for Mateta, maybe not so much, because obviously Isak's someone you'll want back later on. But for anyone else, it looks pretty good. The one question I've seen people ask is if I'm bringing in Mateta now, but I'm not free hitting in 29, i.e. I would need to take him back out for 29, is it worth 2 transfers? That is a tricky question to give a definitive answer to. My gut feeling is if you're sat there with like 1 or 2 transfers, I would maybe avoid it unless you're absolutely desperate for a new forward. I'm not sure he's that good that it's worth 2 transfers. If you're sat there with 3, 4, 5 and you don't really have too much else to deal with, then he probably is as a short-term punt for the next 4 fixtures on penalties. 3 of those games at home. Just spoken about the Villa defensive issues. Ipswich at home is a decent fixture. I think it looks pretty good. So take into account what chip strategy you're possibly going for and also how many transfers you've got. If you sat there with 1, with a double to think about in 25, then maybe taking some of those players back out as well, he's maybe not so enticing. But if you're in a good position, I really like him for the next 4. I think he could do well. Let's talk about Morgan Rogers next. 120,000 transfers in so far this week. Interestingly, that only puts him second on the list for midfielders being brought going into game week 25. The guy at the top has over 400,000 transfers in with a single game week. I'm going to talk about him in a minute. Rogers obviously has the double. Ipswich at home and Liverpool at home, which I quite like. Liverpool is obviously not easy, but at least it's at home. And you're not really worried about clean sheets with Rogers. It's only the goals and assists you're looking for. So I think the double is quite nice. And I think for Aston Villa attackers, for midfielders in particular, he is the number 1 choice to bring in. Because you know you've got the starts, you know you've got the minutes. Like, he's been secure all season. The only game he hasn't started was the one where he's been suspended. So for game week 25, he looks good. After that, maybe not so much. Like, Chelsea at home in 26, followed by Palace away and Brentford away, is certainly not terrible. It's not an amazing fixture run, and then they blank in 29. And I can tell you, as someone that's owned Rodgers since game week 1, I'm probably going to sell him in 26, and I don't see myself buying him back anytime soon. So in terms of a long-term pick, he's not really the one. So a little bit like Mateta, if you're not sure about that double because of the Liverpool game, and you're sat there with very few transfers, and you don't need to sell any of your midfielders, I wouldn't say that Rodgers is essential this week. If you're looking to sell him, to sell a different midfielder to get funds for another move, and you're looking for someone cheap and he's got the double right in front of you, I like him. And I'm not saying that he has to be sold in 26. I'm just telling you that that's probably my plan, because I think there's other midfielders with better fixtures out there. So as a long-term pick, he's not really the best. But if you're sat there with a few transfers saved up specifically for the double and then to cover the blank as well, I like bringing him in and then taking him out again. In terms of other Villa midfielders, obviously they have brought in Rashford, Marlon and Asensio as well. I think there's risk with the minutes of all of those players right now. If Watkins is ruled out, then it looks like Marlon is probably going to play through the middle, and he might be worth the punt for 5.5 million. But again, for 0.1 million more, you get those guaranteed minutes from Rodgers. So it's whether or not you really want to take that punt. I guess if we're saying that Rodgers is probably a short-term move as well, then maybe you can take the punt if that's the kind of manager you are. But there is obviously some risk there. And if Watkins is fit, then Marlon's minutes aren't secure either. I think with Rashford, like, people are expecting him to come in and do really well, but he was on the bench in the FA Cup, and I don't think that's surprising. Like, Villa are playing well already without him, and he hasn't played a huge amount of football over the last few months, so they need to build up his fitness. I think the idea that Rashford comes in and plays both of these games in 25, like starts them both, is pretty slim. So I would probably avoid them. If we were sat here with the double and then excellent fixtures afterwards, I'd be more interested in taking a punt on one of those Villa midfielders. But I think given how the fixtures look afterwards, I'd just play safe with Rodgers, unless you really want to take that punt. So if you've got lots of transfers or you just need a new midfielder and you want that double right in front of you, I do like Rodgers this week. I'm very happy that I've got him in my team. But after that, he's not as good. And also, by the way, he's on 8 yellow cards. So 2 more and he's going to get suspended for 2 matches. So that's also something to consider as well. So I think Rodgers is great, but don't feel like he's essential to bring in. So Justin Kluivert is now up to 5.9 million, and he is that midfielder with over 400,000 transfers in this week, and rightly so, right? Bournemouth playing really well, scoring plenty of goals. Kluivert's getting plenty of points. He's under 6 million. He's on penalties, and the fixture run is great. So it's Southampton away this week, Wolves at home in 26. Then you've got Brighton away and Spurs away covering the next 4 game weeks. Like, 3 of the next 4 are away, but I don't think anyone is expecting Bournemouth not to do well. Then you've got Brentford at home in 29, so no blank game week. If you already used your free hit, you can just play them the whole way through. And then after 29, they're still decent. It's Ipswich at home in game week 30. And even after that, it's still pretty good. It's West Ham away in 31 and Fulham at home in 32. And by the way, if Bournemouth or Man United get through to the FA Cup semi-final, which there is probably a good chance that at least one of them does that now because Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal all out, then there is a chance they'll double in 33. That is not guaranteed, but it could happen. So you've got good fixtures up until 29. They also play in 29. Even if you're free hitting, you've then got good fixtures afterwards and a possible double in 33. So whatever chip strategy you're on, Bournemouth look pretty good. And if you're sat there not knowing how you want to play your chips, which by the way is perfectly fine, I'm kind of in a similar position. I'm not completely locked in yet. Then go for Bournemouth because they keep your options open. Is Kluivert the best Bournemouth midfielder to bring in? Probably right now, given the minutes and the penalties. If you're sat there with not enough money, I would not worry about bringing in Semenyo or Utara instead. I think both of those players are good. Semenyo in particular, we know his long-term minutes are pretty much locked in. So both of those guys are good too. The question that some people are going to have, should I buy Rodgers or should I just go for Kluivert? I would probably only go for Rodgers if you're stacked on transfers, where you've got like 3+, where you can bring him in for the double and then just take him back out for a Bournemouth midfielder from 26 onwards, which is probably what I'm going to do. It's not great to miss the Southampton fixture, but I would definitely take 2 home games and a double over a Bournemouth midfielder, even with how good they've done recently. If you're sat there with very few transfers, I would just play it safe probably and get the Bournemouth guy. It doesn't feel great to bring in a single game week player over a doubler, but I think in a lot of people's cases, like with the way their team is set up and how many transfers they've got, that probably is the right thing to do, especially if you've got other issues to deal with, right? Like, we don't even know if Trent is fit yet, although by the time this video goes out, we might have heard from Arne Slot. Yeah, I think if you've got a lot of transfers, I go Rodgers first. If not, I think you just buy Kluivert because he looks great for the long run. So for defenders this week, only Gabriel and Kirkes have had more transfers in than Ola Aina for Nottingham Forest, just over 60,000 and counting. I've not had Forest players in my team all season, so maybe I'm the wrong person to talk about this. I have dodged a lot of points. But trying to look at it objectively, this has to be the wrong time to buy a Forest defender. Fair enough if you've got Aina in your FPL squad and you just want to keep him. You've got a lot of money wrapped up in him, whatever it is. Fair enough. But buying new for 5.4 million, I do not get it. I love the Arsenal defence for FPL. I love the Liverpool defence. I'm not even sure I'd buy them with the fixtures that are coming up. Like Fulham away in 25, Newcastle away in 26, Arsenal at home in 27, and then City at home in 28. The next game that I would probably target Forest for defensive returns is Ipswich away in 29. And even that's not going to be easy. Now, before anyone says it, I know how good the Forest defensive stats are so far this season, right? They have been great. But I just don't like any of the next 4 fixtures. Fulham away maybe, but they have also played pretty well in terms of attacking threat this season. Newcastle away, Isak. Arsenal at home is never going to be easy. And then City at home, right? I know they have not played well this season, but they've still got so many attackers that can punish you. I just don't get it. If you want to keep him, fair enough, but do not use a transfer to get a Forest defender this week. It has to be the wrong call, doesn't it? So the defender with the most transfers out so far this week is Lewis Hall, just over 130,000. And it kind of makes sense when you look at the fixtures. So this week is Man City away, tricky for a clean sheet. 27 is Liverpool away. And then in 29, they've got a blank. The 2 fixtures in between, Forest at home, not bad. And then West Ham away in 28. I don't see a huge amount of clean sheets for Newcastle over the next 5 game weeks. I think it's perfectly reasonable to sell Lewis Hall. I would say this though, right? And it comes back to chip strategy once again. Unfortunately, we're at that stage of the season where it's got to be considered. If you think there's a chance or a good chance you're going to free hit in 29 and you got Lewis Hall cheap, like 4.4, 4.5, 4.6 million, whatever it was, I would consider holding him. Because I don't think it's that bad to bench him this week, play him against Forest in 26, bench him for Liverpool, play him against West Ham, free hit him out, and then have him for the fixtures from 30 onwards, plus that possible double in 33. In that scenario, I'd maybe keep hold of him. Outside of that, especially if you're going to not free hit in 29 and wildcard like 30, 31, whenever it might be, then I think selling him is absolutely fine. Because the only home game they've got from now until game week 30 is Forest at home in 26. And also, if you sell him and then you can't afford later on to buy him back, Newcastle do have other options in defence. Lewis Hall is probably the best. Like, I'm not trying to say that he's not. But as long as he's fit, you've got someone like Botman, who's actually currently flagged at the moment. But if he can get through to kind of game week 30 and still be available, he's only 4.4 million. So there are cheaper options into that defence if you can't afford Lewis Hall later on. But the fact that he's already being sold and will probably continue to be sold because of that blank in 29 will mean that hopefully his price will come down. So even if you sell him and he's 5.1, hopefully by the time we need to buy him back again after game week 29, he'll be down to like 5, maybe 4.9 if we get really lucky. He's not going to suddenly go down to like 4.7, 4.6, but we should see a couple of price drops, I think. So reasonable to sell for most people. If you think you might free hit in 29, I would consider keeping hold of him if you can get through the next few weeks with him on the bench most game weeks. So Johan Wissa has a few transfers in this week, just over 68,000 so far. And I think for 6.3 million, he represents really good value still. Like, the guy is putting up 0.6 expected goals per 90 minutes. That's kind of crazy for his price point. And most of the time, he's playing 90 minutes as well. So it looks like an all-round good option. I did find it funny how much hype there was for Brentford players ahead of that Spurs match in game week 24. And then obviously they went and lost 2-0. And actually, Wissa only has 2 goals in the last 9 game weeks, which I think is quite a surprising stat for how much he's talked about. But I don't think that matters. The guy's put up good numbers all year. He's currently on, 10 goals, 3 assists in 20 starts, so 13 attack and returns. That is decent for the price. So if you're looking for a new forward, you don't want to go to like a Watkins, you don't have the money for Mateta. Brentford have got West Ham away this week, Leicester away in 26. It's a home game against Everton and Villa in 27-28. They play in 29 against Bournemouth away. I still think he looks really good. And if you bought him in last week and you're disappointed, there is absolutely no reason to sell him. I think once he's in your team, you're probably keeping him until either you wildcard or you free hit in 29. And he's just fine to hold all the way through. I think at that price and below, he's probably the best option right now. Like, no one's buying João Pedro or Strand Larsen or anyone like that. It's got to be Wissa at 6.3. So the rollercoaster ride of transfers in and out for midfielders costing less than 6 million continues. Amad Diallo, who's been pretty popular ever since Ruben Amorim took over, especially since that hat-trick against Southampton in game week 21, has been sold by nearly 150,000 FPL managers this week. Only Anthony Gordon has more transfers out for midfielders so far, which is kind of interesting. Part of the reason is, since the excitement of that Southampton game, he's played 90 minutes against Brighton, Fulham and Palace and blanked in every single one. Man United not playing particularly well at the moment. And of course, as we've already spoken about, Rodgers has got a double game week. Kluivert looks good, but so does Semenyo and Utara. There are other players at this price point that you can move to. If you're going to a Bournemouth player or Rodgers, I think that's fair enough. For everyone else, I wouldn't necessarily be in a rush to sell Amad. I think at 5.6 million, it's still pretty good value. Spurs away, Everton away, Ipswich at home next 3. Not terrible fixtures. Arsenal at home in 28, bit tougher. Then you've got a guaranteed match in 29. So for those of you looking to not use your free hit and maybe save it until a double later on or the blank in 34, you've got Leicester away. And I appreciate Man United made hard work of Leicester in the FA Cup. And I'm not going to get into the Harry Maguire goal right now. But on paper, it's still a good fixture. So I don't think there's a rush to have to sell Amad. And also, I'm not really sure, outside of those players that I mentioned, where people are even going. Let me go to midfielders. Transfers in so far this week. So Kluivert top, then Rodgers, then Mbeumo. Fair enough, right? If you want to go to him, he's a good option. Then Semenyo, who I spoke about. Then Rashford. Like, I know Rashford's got a double, but I think he only starts one of them maximum. So Amad's got the same number of fixtures this week in my eyes, and also is more likely to continue playing afterwards. I might have it wrong with Rashford. Once he gets up to full fitness, he might just be in the team every single week, but I just don't think it's a guarantee. Elanga, Gibbs-White, they're okay, but of course the fixtures for Forest are about to get a bit worse, and Elanga's not more expensive, but Gibbs-White is. Utara I've already spoken about, and actually then Amad has 40,000 transfers in as well as 150,000 out. So yeah, I think if you're going to Bournemouth or Villa, fair enough. For everyone else, I'd probably just keep him in your team. So I think the fixtures coming up are pretty decent. Let me know what you thought about all those players in the comments below. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast. I'm sure there's lots of questions about chips and the FA Cup draw and stuff like that. I can cover them all on the Game Week preview tomorrow. I'll have my team selection on Thursday as well. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll catch you again soon.